Hey everyone, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Keisha and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of March. March was quite a busy reading month for me because middle grade March was going on. I did read a lot of middle grade books. I actually read 15 middle grade books and then I also read another book, making a total of 16 for the month. I'm only going to talk about 12 of the books that I read today just because I feel like 16 is a lot and 12 is a lot too, but I want to just talk about 12 of them today. The other 4 I do have reviews for on my Goodreads, and that is always linked down below, so if you'd like to check that out, you can. I did read a lot of graphic novels on the Libby app this month, and I did actually start more books than I finished because I am trying to kind of weed through this giant list of graphic novels that I want to read. And so if I start them and think I probably won't like them, then I just DNF them, but I'm not counting them as read because I don't complete enough of it. So yeah, that's not counted in the 16, but let's just go ahead and talk about the 12 books that I do want to talk to you guys about today. The one book that I read this month that was not a middle grade was actually a YA book, and that is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is one of my most highly anticipated books of the year, and when I got the book in the mail, I did pre-order it. I was so excited about it because it's beautiful. This is probably one of the most intricately illustrated and beautiful books that I own. I don't know, I just think it's very beautiful. You can tell just from this that it's gonna kind of be a darker Secret Garden retelling, and there are little ink blob portraits throughout as well. So this is a kind of horror fantasy novel, once again, that is kind of a little bit of a retelling of The Secret Garden, but a lot darker. It follows our main character, Olivia Pryor, and she is in an orphanage and she's also mute. So I thought that was really interesting that there is a mute character here and just kind of seeing how she communicates. Olivia receives this mysterious letter one day that is beckoning her to Gallant. When she arrives at Gallant, she finds out that nobody there sent her the letter. She thought it was from her uncle, but she finds out that nobody sent her the letter. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to spoil anything. But she starts to wonder who sent her this letter, why is she at Gallant, and what kind of nightmares are possessing her cousin's dreams. What secrets is Gallant keeping? So if you know The Secret Garden, you know kind of where this draws from. But it does take some other twists and turns along the way. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, but I will say that this is probably one of my most disappointing books of the month because I was so highly anticipating it, and it was only 3 stars for me. I do like Victoria Schwab. I do like some of her books. I like Vicious and Vengeful, and I also like her Cassidy Blake series that is middle grade, but I have not found anything else by her that I like yet. So I used to think that she was a favorite author. Now I think that I like some of her stuff and some of it that I don't like. So I don't know. I feel like this is such a controversial opinion for me to have because I feel like so many people love Gallant. But to me, it just it was a really flowy, easily written and readable book, but it felt very hollow. It just felt like there was something missing. I think that the premise was good, but it was a little bit long, and it's not even that long of a book, especially with the pictures and all the white space. But I feel like it should have been written as a novella. I don't feel like there was enough depth to the story. I didn't really care about the characters as much as I feel like I should have. And overall, I just kind of feel like I was left wanting more, and I don't feel like this is going to be a super memorable book for me. But what I will say is that Gallant actually inspired me to go ahead and pick up The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. So this is one of the first books that I read for middle grade March this month, and I don't even know what to say about this. This book was published in 1910, and so it's been around for a very long time, and I had never heard the story, I'd never watched the movie, I'd never read the book, so I have gone 28 years of my life without knowing anything about the story. I've never been spoiled for it. I just had no idea what this was about. Now, when I went into the story, I wasn't sure if I was gonna like it. It was kind of slow starting out. I wasn't sure about it. But I ended up falling in love with this story and these characters. Mary, Dickon, and Colin are just incredible. And I will say that I understand there are some problematic elements with this book, especially because it was written in 1910. But overall, if you look at the book in the time that it was presented and then just kind of seeing how it holds up today as far as how it was written in like understandable terms, not so much like the content, but just that I can understand this and it was written so long ago. I love that. And I feel like very close to this story now because I feel, I don't know, I struggle with anxiety and depression from time to time. It's not something that, you know, like it's an everyday thing, but well, anxiety might be to some extent. It does affect my life a little. And I feel like because of that, I was able to connect with this story on a deeper level. And I just saw things that maybe other people don't see as deeply. And I don't know, I just love this story. And I know this is a well-loved story. So many people do love The Secret Garden. I don't want to tell you what it's about if you don't already know. I would prefer you go into it blind like I did because you just never know what you're going to get. Stick with it. It's so good. And I did watch the 1993 movie adaptation of it as well. I was born in 93, so that's kind of what swayed my decision to watch that version. And I'm so glad that I did because it's exactly how I pictured the characters and the garden and everything. And it was just so magical and wonderful and lovely. And like I cried at the end of the book. I cried at the end of the movie. It was so good. And I did have some problems. Like I did think that it was a little slow and I thought there were some issues with the book with, again, it being an older book and just kind of having some things there that today would be considered more offensive. And then, well, not even just more offensive, but things that should have been addressed. I'll just put it that way, that were not addressed. Lessons that should have been learned that maybe weren't. But I have to say, I started rating this 4 stars. And the more I sat on it, the more I loved this story. And I do think it helped that I watched the movie. But I just kept craving more of this story. So I ended up bumping it up to a 5. It's not a perfect 5-star, but I think this is a story that's going to stick in my heart for forever. So because I loved The Secret Garden so much, I wanted to try to read different versions of it. And I saw this graphic novel retelling on Libby. And I was like, I'm probably going to hate this because it's a modern retelling. But let me tell you, this is The Secret Garden on 81st Street. It is a modern graphic novel retelling of The Secret Garden. The artwork in this book is absolutely gorgeous. I loved it. I think this is definitely an art style that I can get behind, that I would really enjoy like following this illustrator and seeing more of their work because it's just beautiful. But yeah, I was definitely hesitant going into this book because it is a modern retelling of The Secret Garden. And I was like, how is this going to work? Am I going to like it? But y'all, like, I was blown away. I was so blown away. There was like one little thing that I didn't like about the book, but overall, it was like almost perfect. And I know that's kind of blasphemous to say when it's like a retelling, but I loved it. So I think if you like The Secret Garden and you haven't read The Secret Garden on 81st Street by Ivy Noel Weir and illustrated by Amber Padilla, definitely check this out. I don't want to tell you what it's about. Just know that it follows basically the same story as The Secret Garden, just in modern day. I believe it's in New York. And there's like a garden in like, in a loft, maybe not in a loft, but it's like outside of an apartment on a roof in New York. And yeah, and there's a story behind it. And just the way that Colin was portrayed here, it definitely was a more modern day anxiety kind of story. And I just was here for it. I loved it. And I didn't cry at this one, but I definitely like got choked up a little bit. I still felt very connected to these characters and I loved it so much. So if you love The Secret Garden, definitely check this one out. It was a 5-star read for me. Kind of in the same vein of classics, I don't know if this would be considered a classic or not, but I think it's like a modern classic. It's definitely a classic for me, and that is The BFG by Roald Dahl. So I read this book, and I think I might have been, like, the book may have been read to me when I was in elementary school, and I have always just had fond memories of this book. I do want to read quite a few of Roald Dahl's books because I've only ever read Matilda and the BFG. So I was really excited to revisit this one. This was a reread for me. I wanted to reread this and just kind of see how it held up. And I do think this is more of a younger middle grade, so I don't feel like I enjoy it as much as an adult, but it is very whimsical and fun, and I could definitely see myself reading this aloud with my own kids or with other people's kids and just having a blast because there's some funny words in this and it's just very whimsical and fun. If you don't know, this is about a girl named Sophie, and she ends up being taken by the BFG, or the Big Friendly Giant. She learns about giant country and kind of what giants do, that giants, most giants anyways, are not friendly giants, and they eat children and eat people. And this is kind of Sophie and the BFG's story of how they fix that problem. And it is just so cute and fun. The book made me smile. I read the audiobook with it as well. So I physically read it and I listened to the audiobook. And I think that's a great way to consume it, because the audiobook has like musical numbers. I mean, it's not like a musical, but like it's got little musical notes in there. It's got sound effects, and it just sounds so fun. So definitely check out the audiobook and the physical copy of this, because I think with both of them paired together, it's great. I did give this book 4 stars just because I feel like it's not quite perfect, and this 4-star rating is probably me as an adult rating it too. So just keep that in mind, but I feel like most kids would love this. So if you have not shared the BFG with your kids, or if you're a kid out there who needs a good recommendation, or if you're an adult out there who's never read the BFG, definitely give it a shot. I feel like everybody should read it at least once. Like I mentioned before, I did read a lot of graphic novels this month, and one that I read and was so surprised that I loved so much was Katie the Cat Sitter by Colleen A.F. Venable and Stephanie Yu. This was such a fun book. It follows Katie, and Katie's friends are going off to summer camp for the summer, and Katie is not able to go. So she's trying to raise money so she can go for just 1 week to spend some time with her friends. And she ends up becoming Katie the Cat Sitter. So she is sitting 217 cats, all of which have different special skills. They're mischievous and fun. And there's also like a superhero, supervillain story going on here as well. There are really great messages in this book as well, as far as just, I don't know what to call them. They're not like life lessons, but they're things that I think are good messages to portray to people about like taking care of animals. For example, you think about makeup companies who test their products on animals and things like that. So that is an underlying message here, and I absolutely loved that. So if you have not checked out Katie the Cat Sitter, pick it up. There is a second book as well, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. Another book that I read was Winter House by Ben Gooderson. This is a middle grade mystery, and it actually took kind of a sinister twist that I was not expecting. I love this edition of the book. It's the hardcover, and it's got windows. So when you open it up, it reveals the hardcover inside of the Winter House Hotel, and I think that is so neat. So I love this edition. It also has neat illustrations throughout as well. This is a story about a girl named Elizabeth Summers, and she is an orphan, and she actually lives with her aunt and uncle who send her to Winter House over Christmas break. I love this picture. Look at this. Look at the library. When a hotel has a library, like, I'm about to demand that every hotel will have a library, because all of these books, like Green Glass House, I think, and Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, all these places have libraries. And I'm like, why do hotels not have these nice fancy libraries? So, anyways, side tangent. You can tell I'm a book nerd when I demand that hotels get libraries. But anyways, Elizabeth is sent to Winter House. She doesn't really know why. She doesn't know the significance of Winter House, like why her aunt and uncle sent her here. And it comes to find out that somebody actually allowed her aunt and uncle to go off on a trip together and send her here. So like there's just all this secret stuff going on, and Elizabeth meets Norbridge Falls, who owns Winter House Hotel. She starts to learn a little bit of the backstory of the hotel. She meets Freddie, who is another guest who is a kid at the hotel as well. And I don't want to say too much about it, just that it's a mystery. It's super fun. I really liked it. It involves a lot of puzzles. So I feel like if you like Escape from Mr. Limoncello's Library and maybe Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, then you would like this book as well. It is the first book in a series. It's a trilogy, and I'm trying to figure out if I want to continue. I did give this book 4 stars because I thought it was fun, but I feel like it's a little bit slow, and I don't know if it's going to be super memorable for me. So it is a 4-star book. I just don't know if it's going to stick with me. But anyways, Elizabeth Summers is like the best character. I love her so much. Like, she's probably one of my favorite book characters. She is a bibliophile, and she's just very intelligent, and she does like these word puzzles where you try to like start with one word. I'll just show you. There's chapter headers that do it. So this chapter is called An Introduction and a Good Fit. And then fit is like going into box, like you're trying to change the word fit into box, changing it by 1 letter each. So it goes fit, bit, big bog box. And so she has this talent of being able to do those things. I forget what they're called, but she does like anagrams and stuff too, and like word puzzles and coding and all this different stuff. And I think that's super fun. So that definitely added a really fun element to the book as well. This is a more wintry book. It's set at Christmas, but it's not like overly Christmas. I feel like you could still read this in the winter time and enjoy it. And honestly, like it's coming into spring right now anyways, and I still enjoyed reading this. So I think if you like I said, Mr. Limoncello's Library, Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, maybe even Green Glass House, then check out Winter House and see if this would be a good one for you too. Next, I've got a few creepy middle grades, which you guys know I love my spooky books, so you knew this was coming. I do have 3 to talk to you about, and the first one is Juniper Berry by M.P. Kozlowski. This was a really interesting story, and I think if you like Coraline, like the creepiness and bizarreness of Coraline, as well as Behind the Bookcase by Mark Steensland, then this might be the book for you. So the story follows Juniper Berry, and her parents are not quite the same as they used to be. They are actors and actresses, they're movie stars, and Juniper loves to write movie scripts for her parents to perform, but now her parents don't really pay much attention to her anymore, and they've changed a lot since their fame has kind of excelled. And Juniper is trying to figure out what's happened, and she finds this mysterious tree in her backyard, and you kind of get to see how this tree connects to what's going on with her parents. This is a really creepy book. It is very so I don't like movie star-esque type books, so I didn't like this as much. So it was only 4 stars for me, but the illustrations look like amazing cinematography. Like this could definitely be a movie. Let me see if I can find one of the pictures. They just looked really awesome and creepy. So look at this. Like this was the first thing I saw when I opened this book, was like this. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I about to read It by Stephen King? Because like, look at the creepy hand. Can you see that? And that balloon? Y'all have no idea. Like if you're gonna read this book, you have no idea what you're getting into. It is freaking bizarre. Like it's just very, very bizarre. Yeah, I don't know that I would hand this to a middle grade child. Like I say that and I would hand a middle grade child Coraline, but like this was just super intense. And but let me tell you, okay, so I liked it as an adult, and I want more adults to read it at least. This is a middle grade book, so obviously it's acceptable by the standard of the world for 8 to 12-year-olds, but I feel like this could get really scary for a kid. Like the descriptions of things that were happening could get really scary, but I will say that I found some biblical parallels in this book, and I really liked that because that's kind of what reminded me of Behind the Bookcase, is that I was seeing themes in this about like being careful what you wish for, being thankful for what you have, also learning about temptation and how that affects you in your life, how things can tempt you, and learning to say like no, and being strong, and like knowing that temptation isn't a bad thing, you just can't fall into it. And like, I don't know, I don't know if the author like intentionally had biblical themes, but I felt like they were biblical themes, and so that helped my enjoyment of the book. So yeah, it was definitely a wild ride. I would recommend it again if you like Coraline and Behind the Bookcase. So it was 4 stars for me. Definitely check it out. The next spooky story that I have is a newer release, and it is The Keeper by Guadalupe Garcia McCall. This book, y'all, was so good. I enjoyed this from beginning to end. I have very little negative to say about it. Most everything that I have to say is positive. This is a very spooky story that is actually based on a true story. So we have our main characters, James and Ava, and they are moving from Texas to Oregon because their dad has this new job. And so they move, and they're moving to this community that is seemingly perfect. Like nothing ever goes wrong in this community, and they get to know people there. There is some Mexican-American culture that plays into this as well, because our family here is Mexican-American, and a lot of this plays off of their grandmother's stories, like her spooky stories that she used to tell. And there are lots of Spanish words throughout here, and there's actually a glossary in the back as well to kind of help you with your Spanish words if you don't know them, which I really enjoyed, because some of them I knew and some of them I didn't. So I'd like flip back, and I loved learning the new words. So this definitely has great like Mexican culture weaved throughout. But this story follows, like I said, James and Ava. They've just moved to this new town, and James and Ava have like these prank wars going on. This has nothing to do with like the plot of the story, but I feel like this is really what gripped me at the beginning of the book. Is not that it was super scary, but the sibling prank wars between these two was hilarious. Like, I was laughing out loud, loved it. It was super fast paced to read and I loved it, but I was like, is this gonna get scary? Because I just don't feel like this is scary. And the story is about James and Ava, and James gets this letter from the keeper, and the keeper is like this creepy guy that wrote this letter, and he's like, oh, I see you moved into this house and I'm gonna be watching you, and all this weird stuff. It's like there's young blood in the house, and something about like there's gonna be a full moon or a blood moon or something, and you better watch out because like I'm watching you or something. So it's very, very creepy, but it doesn't get super creepy until like halfway through, and then some stuff starts happening and you're like, okay, what's going on? Is this happening in real life? Is this going to be something like paranormal? Is this going to be realistic? What is going on? And y'all, this book got really, really, really dark, and it's actually based off the story of the Westfield Watcher. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that story, but I would say if you want to read the book, to read the book first and then look up the story of the Westfield Watcher so you're not spoiled for anything in the book. They aren't exactly the same, but they're tied like pretty similarly. And the Westfield Watcher story is super creepy. I was like, what the heck? I never heard about this happening. And it was recent years. So definitely read this book and then go and look up the Westfield Watcher story. So I did really, really like this book, and I gave it 4.5 stars, and let me tell you why. This is one of those books that I might hesitate to give to a kid because I feel like this scared me as an adult because it could be very realistic. It's based off a true story, and that terrifies me. And so I feel like I wouldn't want to hand this to my child because I wouldn't want them to be scared like this. Like, I don't mind, like, these other spooky stories are a little bit more fantasy and I can like console my child, but with this, it's more realistic. And like, I understand that children need to know, like, be aware of like real dangers and stuff. So I'm trying to figure out, because I'm not saying that I'm right in feeling that I shouldn't hand this to a child. I don't think that I'm right in that, but just like there were literally things in here telling a kid, like, if you get kidnapped, this is a good tip for, you know, what would need to happen, what you can do to, you know, help yourself in this situation. And I'm like, I don't like this. Like, I don't want to think about this, much less like having a kid have anxiety about something like this. So I did lower my rating just 0.5 star because of that, because I feel like it's very realistic adult content. It's not like adult, but like this stuff could happen in real life. So I don't know. I just feel like it would be super hard for me to, I don't know. I have like reservations, but adults out there, I absolutely think you should read this book and look up the story of the Westfield Watcher because it is wild. Like, this was such a good story, and I want to read more from Guadalupe Garcia McCall. I didn't realize she had written other books, and now she has a book coming out called something, maybe it's Echoes of Grace, but it's a adult like mystery thriller that's coming out. The cover is gorgeous, and like she has other backlist books like Summer of Mariposas or something like that I want to read all of her books because they just all sound really good. So I found a new author that I think might be a favorite depending on if I love all of her books, but I definitely really enjoyed this one. I feel like I'm very chatty today, so I apologize if this video has been really long, but thank you for sticking with me. I do have another spooky book to share with you, and that is book 3 in the Small Spaces series by Catherine Arden. This is Dark Waters, and oh, you guys, I'm a little bit sad about this one because this was the first 4 star, so it's still good, but the first 2 books in the series were 5 star. They scared me. This one did not really scare me so much. This was a lot of like Loch Ness Monster, piratey type stuff, like stuff that I'm not keen keen on, but I do think it was still a really good story. It wasn't as scary as the other ones, and I've heard a lot of people say that this feels like a filler book, and I can see how people would think that, but I don't think it was a bad book at all. I think for the target audience, this is a great book, and I think most kids would love this. I still really liked the book. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars, and the cliffhanger at the end, I was like, okay, this is setting up for something good. So I'm really excited for the 4th book. It comes out in the fall. But yeah, I can see how people don't like this one as much. It still follows our main characters, Ollie, Coco, and Brian from the first book, and their kind of encounter with the smiling man, and the first book where they have encounters with some creepy scarecrows and all this different stuff. It kind of branches off from that story, so I definitely recommend the series still. This one just did not, like, it just wasn't 5 stars. Like, I wanted it to be 5 stars and it wasn't, but it was still good. I still love the series. I still highly recommend it, and I'm excited for the next book. Okay, if you have stuck with me this long, I have saved the best for last. These next 3 books are my favorite books that I read this month. They make me so happy and just like have all the good feelings, because I just feel like I've had kind of a rough reading year so far. I feel like I've read books that I've liked, and I've rated books 4 and 5 stars, but they haven't just been books that I feel like are like heart connection books, books that will stick with me for the rest of my life, books that I love so much that I want to own, that I want to share with other people. But these next 3 books are definitely those. So I'm gonna like do a build up. So this is like, I don't want to like rank them, but I guess they're gonna be ranked like 3, 2, 1 to my favorites. But we're gonna start with The Book Wanderers, Pages & Co. by Anna James. This is the first book in a series, and it is so fun, you guys. This book makes me so happy. I have seen this book everywhere. I've heard people talk about it for a really long time, and honestly, I thought that I wasn't gonna like this book as much as I did. I thought it would probably be like a 3-star read for me, but it was so fun and just like magical. I don't even have the words to describe this book. It follows our main character, Matilda Pages, or Tilly, and Tilly is currently living in Pages & Co., which is a bookstore, with her grandparents, and her mother went missing all these years ago. They don't know what happened to her, and she doesn't know who her father is. So Tilly has grown up in this bookshop, and one day she's like roaming through the stacks, and she meets Anne of Green Gables, and she doesn't realize at first that Anne is actually there. She thinks it's a customer, and she's like, this isn't Anne, but she looks a lot like Anne. And then she meets Alice in Wonderland, and she's like, okay, this is weird. What is going on? And she finds out that she can actually book wander. So not only can these characters come out of their books and visit her in Pages & Co., but she can actually go into books with these characters as well and explore different stories. I don't want to say too much about this one because it could very easily be spoiled, because there's not like a whole lot to it. But I think this was so cool and so magical, and I had to keep reminding myself that like, this is not real life, Keisha. This can't happen in real life. But man, it really, like, Anna James really made me feel like it could, because you know, when you read a book and you get really into it and you're just like so immersed in the story that once you stop reading it, you have to remind yourself like, okay, I'm actually in my house, in my living room, sitting in my recliner reading this book, and I'm not actually in this book. But when a book grips you, it grips you. And like, when Tilly gets gripped, it's not like she just gets gripped, but there's a chance that she can go into the story. And I think that's incredible. And just the whole system of book wandering, the whole magical system of it, because there are multiple book wanderers, and just kind of seeing how that works and the politics of it all and the rules of it all was super interesting. And I just loved it. The book made me so happy. And I was so shocked at the end of this book, because like, I kind of saw something coming, or some things coming in the book. It is a middle grade. It can be a little predictable. But then there was something that happened that was a twist, and I was like, I had no idea this was going to be a thing. And so it definitely surprised me, and I loved it so much more than I thought I was going to. It is a 5-star read for me, and this was actually the book that my middle grade book club that I host, this is what we read this month, and I feel like we just read like 2 really good books in a row. And so yeah, this is definitely a favorite. If you have not read The Book Wanderers yet, please pick it up. I went ahead and purchased the next 2 books in the series just because I loved this one so much. Okay, 2 more books left. The next one is Ceces Journal, The Adventures of a Writer in Training by, I'm going to butcher these names, so I apologize, Joris Chamberlain and Aurélie Neret. I believe they're French. I cannot do a French accent. I don't know how to pronounce things in French, so I apologize that I probably didn't say their names correctly, but they are phenomenal. These like authors, illustrators are stinking amazing. I don't even know what to say about this. This is a book about a girl named Ceces, and she writes a journal, and she goes through life. It's her and her mom and her friends, and she just like, things happen. I don't know what to say, because it's like a contemporary, which I don't normally like, but this book, like the illustrations in this freaking book are some of the prettiest. So it starts out where you see Ceces journal entries, and it's kind of like a scrapbook, and then it goes into a graphic novel format, and there's part 1 and part 2 in this book, and the stories that I just don't have words. I don't have words because both stories made me cry. They made me tear up. They're so beautiful and so magical, and I can't show you like all the pictures in this book because it would spoil things, but like it's just incredible. Like the art in this and the stories, like because there's 2 different stories in part 1 and part 2. The stories that happen in this book are just so realistic. It makes me wonder if they were based on true things, but they grip your heart. They make you happy. They grip your heart, and I cannot wait. There's a second like omnibus or compilation book that has, I think, part 3, 4, and 5 in it. And I don't know if there's going to be more, but I really hope there is, because this is one of my favorite graphic novels. I think this is either like side by side with The OK Witch for me, or it beat The OK Witch for me. And it may have beat The OK Witch. And you guys know how much I love that graphic novel. This is so good. So good. If you take any graphic novel recommendation from me, please let it be this one, because it's so, so good. I highly recommend it. 5 out of 5 stars, and I cannot wait to read more from these authors. And the last book, and one of my new favorite books, but also the book that I probably am going to have the hardest time explaining because it's the first one that I read. It was like the end of February, beginning of March, and that is Letters from the Lighthouse by Emma Carroll. So for those of you who don't know, Emma Carroll is said to be like the queen of middle grade historical fiction, and while this is only my first book by her, I definitely already agree with that statement. I agree, and I think that like I'm gonna love all of her books. Middle grade historical fiction has become one of my favorite genres, and I think this is just probably one of the most perfect stories that I've ever read. It is set during World War II. It's in February 1941 during their air raids in London, and Olive and her brother Cliff are evacuated to the Devon coast to kind of keep them safe during these air raids. And some stuff happens. I don't really remember all of it right now, but I will say this. This book has some of the best life lessons in a book I've ever read in my life. Like so many different things that hit me, especially with like what's going on in our world today. Just things that hit me and made me think like, wow, my mindset about this is really messed up. This book made me think, it made me cry, it made me laugh. It just like broke my heart open, and it just like, I loved it. I just loved it so much. Olive's sister Suki went missing during an air raid, and so Olive is trying to figure out where Suki went, what happened to her. There are secrets on this Devon coast as well. There is some codes, secret coding and stuff that happens throughout this as well. I don't want to say too much about it, but if you like historical fiction or middle grade, or even if you don't, like if you want to just see if you like historical fiction, try this. Let this be your first one, because this was such a good book. Like if I ever reread this, I'm going to tab it. It was that good. And I don't tab my books. I don't annotate my books, but this one was so, so good. This was probably one of the absolute favorites that my middle grade book club ever read. We read this back in February, but we didn't finish it. Like I didn't finish it until like the beginning of March. And so I went ahead and saved it for March, because this is like one of my favorite books of the year so far, if not my favorite book of the year so far. It's so, so good. So definitely check this one out. And if you have read Emma Carroll before, let me know down in the comments what Emma Carroll books you've read, or what's your favorite book of hers. I have purchased another one. I got When We Were Warriors, and I'm really excited to check that one out. I also have a couple more books coming. I think I got, what did I get? I think it's an Egyptian one. It's like the summer or the sun something. I think it's set in Egypt. It's got a camel on the front, but that one's coming as well. So I'm very excited to check out more of Emma Carroll. This was 5 out of 5 stars. Such a good book, and one of my new favorite middle grade historical fictions. Okay, y'all, I think I was a little bit long-winded today, but I just wanted to make sure I told you guys about all of these books, because I think they all deserve to be talked about. They all deserve some airtime. They deserve some love. So hopefully with all of that, you found a couple of new books to check out today that maybe you hadn't heard of before. Please let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these and what your thoughts were, or if I may have piqued your interest in a new book. And also let me know what your favorite book that you read in the month of March was. I appreciate and love all of you so, so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, friends.